Now to the latest on the investigation into Charlie Kirk's alleged assassin, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson. The FBI has revealed it's found the suspect's DNA on the roof where the fatal shot was allegedly fired from. And they've also discovered what appears to be a confession made by the accused in an online group chat where he wrote, "Hey guys, I have bad news for you all. It was me at UVU yesterday. Sorry for all of this." Joining me now for more on this is Sky News contributor Kosha Gada. Kosha, great to see you in Sydney. It would seem investigators are compiling some pretty compelling evidence against Tyler Robinson here. What do you make of these latest developments?
Definitely they're building a case, clearly the criminal case. Many people want the death penalty sought, which is on the books in Utah as well as federally, if they're able to bring a federal charge, which is still unclear. I think what's more interesting from these chats is who else was maybe an accomplice or an accessory or fomenting this kind of attitude. And the reason for that is now the president, the vice president, multiple people have signaled that this is actually an organized domestic terror type group, possibly, where there's people, agitators out there funding it, potentially grooming people or getting them motivated in these chat servers and other places. And is there a case to try and break that down the way you would a criminal enterprise, like the mafia back in the day? So I think that's another thread that they're looking at, that who are these other people he's confessing to? What did they know? When did they know it? What role have they played in addition to him, the person who actually pulled the trigger? So I think a lot more to come on this. And if it spans wider and farther than just the one person who pulled the trigger, that I think is a pretty consequential outcome.
Yeah, frightening to consider that there could have been others who were supporting him and helping to fund this. We're also learning more about his transgender roommate and boyfriend, Tyler Robinson's roommate and boyfriend, that is, a man who was transitioning to become a woman. One of his family members told Fox News that he hates conservatives and Christians and that he hated his family. He was not raised that way, but he, over the years, has become really detached, been radicalized. He has obviously gotten progressively worse the last year or two, said the relative, adding he's always very angry. Now, all these comments are about the boyfriend who we've seen in reports has been cooperating with the FBI, unlike Tyler Robinson. What are your thoughts on these comments from a family member?
It's so interesting. I feel like we're only scratching the surface with this, and there's so many sensational details emerging. The fact that, first of all, Tyler Robinson came from ostensibly a normal, middle-class, pretty conservative religious family and then went off to college and completely went off the deep end. Then it emerges he's in a romantic relationship with his roommate who's a transsexual boy trying to transition to female, and also furry, which is a whole other subculture.
I heard you talk about that yesterday on air.
I went down
a whole other rabbit hole.
A rabbit hole I never wanted to go down, and unfortunately I did, so you don't have to.
Thank you.
So that's a whole other thing. And
yeah, don't Google furry if you're watching.
It just shows, how weird this whole thing is, and sad and dangerous, obviously. And then the fact that the roommate is cooperating, to me, I don't know, but I would posit that it's for self-preservation purposes, because if, again, he knew anything or was an accomplice of murder, then he potentially is in legal jeopardy as well, and maybe there's some sort of immunity deal or other things happening behind the scenes. I'm sure we'll find out. But this is just going from bizarre to more bizarre, and the juxtaposition against Charlie, this clean-cut, all-American, Christian young man, married, beautiful wife, beautiful kids, and then these guys just look more and more bizarre on the other side. That is what I think the whole world is seeing, and it's really awakening something, I think, in people globally that's beyond what I think anybody even expected.
But as you pointed out, how did he go from this seemingly normal upbringing in a conservative religious family to such far left ideology? At least that's what we're hearing from official sources.
Right.
So it is fascinating.
It's every parent's nightmare, worst nightmare. How does that happen? I think parents across America and around the world are really scared and wondering, how can this happen and how can you avoid it?
Yeah, absolutely. US Vice President J.D. Vance, meanwhile, has paid tribute to his late friend Charlie Kirk, hosting a 2-hour memorial broadcast of the Charlie Kirk Show live from the White House. Here's some of what he had to say.
The entire administration is trying to do as much as possible to find everything that we can about what led to this, about how we got here, and of course, ultimately, how an assassin took Charlie's life. I wanted to zoom out with Stephen a little bit and talk about all of the ways that we're trying to figure out how to prevent this festering violence that you see on the far left from becoming even more and more mainstream. And
Vance also announced the Trump administration is preparing to unleash on non-government organizations, left-wing activists, and domestic terrorist networks advocating violence against conservatives. Kosha, he didn't hold back in this.
He didn't, and that's what we were talking about earlier, that it's more than just one person. Yes, one person pulled the trigger, but there's a whole pyramid, a structure underneath it, including funding with the NGOs and others, overtly, covertly, these other people who sort of, at least narratively, are in these chat rooms and egging each other on, openly calling for assassination of fellow Americans and all of that. He gets it, Stephen Miller gets it. And they are laying the groundwork and saying that they are going to treat this as a domestic terrorist organization. It's happened before in history, like the Weather Underground in the 1970s. Obviously, the mafia was a different thing. So there is a precedent for going after domestic terrorist organizations, and it starts with classifying them as such, Antifa and everything else, and then actually methodically using the resources of the government, trying to dismantle it and hold people accountable. So if that happens, that is one silver lining, I think, from this very tragic story.
You cannot imagine that possibly happening under a Biden administration. They wouldn't be going after these far-left groups if that was the case.
Many people have been sort of thinking about this alternate reality if Kamala Harris had won, and she came dangerously close to winning. As we know, the election was a landslide, but it was also close. These things can very quickly go in a different direction. And had this happened to Charlie Kirk under that administration, I think you'd see a very different outcome. So that's another, I don't want to call it a silver lining because it's such a horrible tragedy, but one thing that could have been worse that I think will be better.
Well, America's top diplomat, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, has warned the United States will revoke the visas of people who celebrate the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Here he is.
Well, we revoke visas of people. I don't know, we've revoked visas of people that are inside the country. We've most certainly been denying visas. I mean, think about it. I want everybody to think about this for a moment, okay? You're out there celebrating the assassination in cold blood of someone, and then you want to come in. Why would we want anybody like that in our country as a tourist, as anything? We don't want them here.
Kosha, it seems like common sense to me. Why? I mean, if you're accepting people on character grounds, surely celebrating the assassination, a political violence of someone who was just speaking at an event on a college campus shows that you are not a good character if you're celebrating that.
And the point is, you're a guest. You're a guest in the country if you're on a visa, even if you're on a green card, you're a guest. And many Americans, I certainly speak for myself, but many of them support this, and they will say, get out. If this is how you feel, get out. We don't need you. We have enough of our own problems and our own people, many of whom have also been celebrating this, by the way, and are getting fired, and that's a whole other sort of current that's coming out from here, where people are losing their jobs for openly putting this stuff on social media. But they're American citizens, so the greatest consequence is, okay, you get fired or canceled, potentially. If you're a foreigner, he has every right as Secretary of State to do that. He did it for a couple of students on the Columbia campus during the agitation that was happening there with the Gaza and anti-Israel protests, for example. It was controversial then as well. The only argument that the other side makes that there's some credibility to is this a slippery slope where an appointed cabinet person, secretary, is able to decide the grounds, and okay, here it's common sense, but is it a slippery slope that you have them willy-nilly canceling visas? But I think the counterpoint is, if you're a guest in a country, show some respect. And if I were an immigrant or living in another country, like, I wouldn't dare say something like this about somebody in Australia, as an example, as a guest here.
You would think that would be just widely appreciated by people. I mean, as you point out, and as we've shown on this show, especially on Lefties Losing It, and there are so many people who are American citizens who are celebrating this, so many on the left, which is so awful to see. And some are saying, well, this is free speech, they shouldn't be getting cancelled, but I don't think it's being cancelled. They're not going to prison for it.
Right.
But there are consequences.
Yes.
Professionally, especially.
Absolutely. The people crying for free speech didn't cry about it in 2020 when there was a mass purge on the other side for people who didn't want to use preferred pronouns or didn't.
They started it, really.
They started
Let's be honest. It is a tool of the left.
Absolutely, or questioning, the efficacy of vaccines or not wanting to take the vaccine. People were in mass numbers fired. This is just a little bit of that. And free speech means, correct, you're not being imprisoned for your speech. They are free to post this vile hate on Facebook, but there are consequences professionally. Free speech does not guarantee employment protection, basically. So that is happening. Students have gotten expelled. A lot of them are teachers and nurses, pilots, even military members, which has shocked people because you're involved with the safety of other Americans. And if a pilot, for example, is that hateful, or a kindergarten teacher that you're entrusting your little one with is that hateful, that's a big deal. So it's a big grassroots effort that's going out there where people are calling up employers and telling them, hey, do you stand by this employee of yours that did this? And they're getting fired in a way that 5 years ago I don't think would have happened. So it feels like there's just been a shift in the culture for the better.
There is this boycott campaign out there, somewhat uncomfortable with it sometimes, but at least people are revealing who they are. That's what we have the internet to thank for. We can see what people really stand for. Speaking of Marco Rubio, he also warned that nations who recognize a Palestinian state are dragging out the deadly Gaza war and hurting the cause they think they are furthering. He made the remarks during a visit to the Middle East where he's been meeting officials in Israel and Qatar. Kosha, some pointed remarks here ahead of Anthony Albanese's UN visit. Obviously, our Prime Minister has said we will recognise Palestine at that visit. What do you think this will mean, again, for the relationship that we have with the US?
It's obviously not helpful if he hasn't even gotten a meeting right now and they're on different sides of this issue. The US actually is a little bit kind of on an island on this. A lot of European nations are recognizing, and the tide seems to be shifting away from support for Israel in terms of the strength with which it's been that way before. And the US kind of is out there a little bit on their own. And it doesn't come without a cost, because the younger part of the electorate, even in the US, is not actually that supportive of this. And this is one area where the Trump administration is maybe a little bit out of step with the younger voters that came in, where not that they're against Israel, but they just don't want the US exerting or using its money, troops, or influence at the UN, for it. But Trump has always been very strong on this issue, as is the Secretary of State, and they are very clear that that's their position. And I do think that he's going to exert pressure on other nations that are not in that camp, whether it's the NATO allies, whether it's possibly Australia over here. And that is just, I think, what we're going to have to hash through.
Yeah, well, I'm glad they've stood firm in the face of some of that MAGA protectionist. But it's interesting to note, though, Kosha, that the Arab states themselves have been stronger than places like Australia and Europe, and many places in Europe, in actually calling for hostages to be released.
Yes,
stronger in that language. That's the irony.
That is ironic.
Look, Donald Trump has arrived in the UK for his second state visit. He is set to hold trade talks with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer after being hosted by King Charles at Windsor Castle. Kosha, I think a lot of pomp and ceremony is on the cards here, but what else can we expect on this visit?
Definitely the pomp and ceremony. Melania is going to look great, as always. There'll be a lot of fashion journalism coming out of it. He meets the cool royals, William and Kate, as well, which does that. For me, when I look at that, the big picture is I just have to laugh that Hitler is at Buckingham Palace, because that Hitlerization that they tried to do.
Such a fascist.
And it's so funny, clearly none of them believed it, because here he is, second state visit with the monarchy, so that's just a broader point. I think the trade deal, their biggest trade partners, and they'll hash out those details, and we've been through a little bit of the tariff lever with the UK, but it got solved pretty quickly, and they got to a framework pretty quickly. Another thing coming out of this visit is they're going to be signing some kind of tech deal, and I think the CEOs of OpenAI and NVIDIA are joining him on that trip. That one's interesting because J.D. Vance apparently played a role in negotiating the framework around it. And there's this fight where the UK is reportedly tightening the grip of censorship a little bit. And one tool in that is demanding that the US platforms take down certain posts that they deem as disinformation. US platforms don't want to do that because it's against the policy and our free speech and England's, to be honest, heritage. And so I think that was a big sticking point, and it looks like they've negotiated something around that we will not be doing that unless it's something explicitly dangerous. If it's an opinion, a dissenting opinion, we will not be taking it down, and you cannot fine our companies global revenue on that. So I think that's something potentially meaningful. If they've made some headway towards there, that would be good.
Well, we will keep an eye on that one. Kosha Gada, thank you for your time. Great to chat as always.
Always a pleasure.